Hi everyone, welcome back to my new setting. This is my wood pile that I did the other week. It was fun. So yeah, I'll be doing this review outside. The weather is nice and I just got back from work and I finished a book yesterday, so might as well talk about it. Do you ever find yourself just taking apart a series of books or a book for the many problems you find in it? And even so, you are completely and utterly unable to stop yourself from reading more. You just can't let it go, you can't DNF it, you have to read the next installment. So this is how I feel about the Demon Cycle series of books by Peter V. Brett. And today I will be talking about a new book in that series, or rather the sequel series. And the first book in that sequel series, which I believe is The Nightfall, it's called The Desert Prince. And a little primer for the entire series, which is something that I think will be needed if you are diving into this book years after the fact. So, in the first book, The Worded Man, which I think is the best one in the series, you have a story of mankind struggling because every single night demons come out of the earth and attack and invade the human civilization. And the only thing that's stopping humans from completely devastating the surviving humans are the wards, which are these symbols that they embroider on clothing, on shields, on their walls, and so forth. And we have three main characters. We have Arlen Bales, who is probably the main character for most of the series, who is this adventure-seeking, curious guy who uncovers the secrets behind the demons and the wards that were lost, because the humanity has barely scraped by and they have lost a lot of the wards they used to have. When we start the series, the humanity only has defensive wards, and he is someone who uncovers offensive ones. Then we have a female character called Alicia Paper, and she is the village herbalist, wise woman apprentice, and with a similar thirst for knowledge and a coming-of-age story as well. And then there's a third character, Roger Halfgrip, who is a juggler, an entertainer in this world, who in his own way is also thirsty for knowledge, but he uncovers a way to battle demons with music. And three of them coalesce and they become huge, gigantic figures in battling the demons and the wars that follow. And one other important aspect of the series is the diametrically opposed culture. A nation of people called Crasians, which are complete opposite of the people in the West, where Arlen and Lisha and Roger live. The Westerners mostly live in fear from demons, and they have little, at the beginning at least, initiative to combat them. They fear them, they do not wish to even acknowledge them, especially if you are wealthy and live rich and deep into a walled city somewhere. Crasians, on the other hand, their whole culture is formed and informed around battling demons, around proving yourself, around dying for the greater cause. They have very distinct castes where if you are a warrior, you come through a grueling upbringing, and if you fail along the way, you are second-class citizen, something they called kafit, which is essentially a caste reserved for non-warriors, merchants, people who work with their hands, laborers, and so forth. And of course the other being warriors, and on the top of the warriors we have the, I believe they're called Dama, or Damating, which is an upper caste of priests who use parts of demons, such as bones, for their magical properties, which they have, to essentially control the population and, of course, battle the demons as well, to heal and do other stuff. And the series is a mixed bag for me, because I'm unable to stop myself, because it has brilliant world building. Absolutely brilliant world building. It's the reason why I stayed. So you have, on one hand, rather simple premise, but the potential to build it up and around is limitless, because I'm a sucker for long-lost technologies that are uncovered, refined, cycles repeating, humanity diverging and developing in some other ways. And with the demon cycle, you have very inventive ways of applying this simple premise, these words, these magical symbols. When you read the books, you almost think that there's no limit to Brett's imagination in how he is able to spin his tale and apply it to his characters. But then we go to the problem of characters, which is also frustrating, because in principle they are compelling characters, but Brett has this tendency to run them into the ground. Where, for example, especially women, which is doubly so frustrating, you have books where at the same time he writes a woman brilliantly and then ruins the established female character completely and utterly. Like, we have a character of Lisha Paper, who is an interesting character because she is someone who wants to carve a path for herself, has this deep academic drive to do so, just not a classical rebel. She wants to do things her way, but in a leveled manner. But the way Peter Brett writes her when it comes to potential love interests feels like she's in constant mood swings, maybe potentially bipolar, even though I don't think it's canon. And then we have the main character, which in my opinion got ruined because he stars as quote-unquote country bumpkin, which is nothing wrong with a country bumpkin. As you can see, I live in the sticks. But he does something very annoying, and it's in relation to the prose, where when the character starts, he comes from a village where everyone around him is uneducated and not intellectually curious at all. So he goes through this amazing character development, and I don't mean this sarcastically, it's truly great character development, where he educates himself, surpasses his peers and his teachers, and his thirst for knowledge and the way he applies that knowledge is fascinating. And it's just a huge motivate her to read more. But then he reconnects with his, I guess, wife-to-be from a promised marriage when they were little kids. And his dialogue on the page regresses to this overly enunciated hick conversation, prose, dialogue, which is unbearable to read. Both him and his wife, his wife-to-be, his bride, just regress. And it's like nails on a chalkboard. And I have nothing against accents. I have accent myself. I have accent while I talk English. I have a distinct accent in both of my native tongues. So Croatian is my native tongue as well as Russian. I am half and half. I have an accent in both. I have an accent in English. I know basic Polish. I have a thick accent in Polish. And it's not something to be ashamed of. In fact, it's something that's diverse. It enriches, I think, language and culture. But when you're forced to read it in a page, when it's so deeply exaggerated, it's just too much. And yeah, I had to vent, sorry. These were my frustrations with the series. And the last book in the series, the previous one, The Core, I think had an unsatisfying ending. And not in the way that, oh, I didn't like how it ended, but in a way that it didn't end. It just stopped. You know, there's a difference between an ending and just stop, final page and paragraph. That's it. And I feel that's how the last book ended. The main hero, Arlen Bales, went through his posse to the center of the earth, essentially, where all of the demons are, the demon queen, did his magical thing, absorbed all of the energy, and poof, ended all demons. And it ended super abruptly. And with this book, we start 15 years later, from the end of the core. And this time we don't have 3 starting main characters, we have 2, which are descendants of the main cast. First character being the most tricky one, Olive. Olive is a direct descendant of Lisha. And the reason why I use the word descendant is because Olive is intersex. And at the beginning of the story, she identifies herself as a woman, as a daughter of Lisha, but then by the end she identifies, by the middle I should say, she identifies as male. And then as, I guess, both at the very end of the story. And I think it's a huge gamble to do. And I'm not the one to judge it because I'm neither intersex or non-binary, so I don't know how well or not it approached the subject. But in terms of pure characterization of believable person, I think he succeeded. The author, I mean. And then the other character being Darlin Bales, who is the son of Arlen and Rena Bales. And he is, well, he's their son. And unlike Olive, who is essentially a princess, because Lisha at the end of the series becomes a duchess and almost becomes a queen too, but she refuses to do so, and she's a person that holds immense influence and power, so Olive is a quote-unquote pampered princess. And on the opposite end we have Darren, who is anything but, in many ways. He does live in the shadow of his father, because he never met him, because his father died when he was still in the belly of his mother. And two of them kind of are thrust into the new adventure where here we discover that the demons are not completely gone, they're here back for vengeance. What happens is, since Olive is leading this very sheltered, limited life, she earns for freedom, so she sneaks out on an occasion and discovers that there are in fact demons. And meanwhile, the Krasian Empire is fractured since one of the tribes have sort of left the greater tribe when there was time to battle demons together, both of the nations, and they formed their own kingdom. And their kingdom is in disrepair, and they want to marry their prince with Olive to strengthen the bond. And when Lisha, Olive's mother, refuses, they kidnap Olive. So Darren forms a posse of his own to mount a rescue of Olive. And in his posse is a cast of interesting characters, actually. His posse has a sibling of Olive, which I guess is her sister or aunt, because Lisha's mother, Olive's grandmother, had an affair later in life. There two of them are like sisters, Olive and her cousin, whose name escapes me now. And another members of the posse are twins from the Krasian Empire. They are a son and a daughter of Roger Halfgrip, who died in the previous series. And they mount a rescue to save Olive. Olive, meanwhile, is brought there, kidnapped, and essentially they discover that she's intersex. So they start treating her as, well, they don't discover that she's intersex. They think that she is a man and that she was being hidden from the Krasian Empire because her being male gives her a place in line to the throne. So they treat her as male, which means they put her in the maze. They put her through the training that all of their warriors go through to raise her as a warrior. And by doing so, she goes through this character development where at first she resents her captors but begins to understand them and even falls in love with a man, the prince, who was promised to her. And she discovers that this prince did not want a princess, but is quite fine with a prince. And that relationship seems genuine. And meanwhile, the posse goes there, discovers what's up. A lot of drama ensues, and what we discover is the demons are actually mounting a revenge attack, targeting descendants of those that killed their leaders 15 years ago, which are son of Arwen Bales and daughter/son of Lisha Paper. And that's that. A lot of swings and roundabouts in the middle, but I think this was a decent book, quite a page turner. To start with things that I enjoyed, I think this time Brett really found his balance with characters. Not that his previous characters were terrible. He just, as I said, ran them into the ground. They didn't start as terrible. Which is not to say that I'm incapable of reading or rooting about terrible people. No, I still don't think they ended up as terrible people in the end. They were just different people, completely doing things that were uncharacteristic for the characters they presented to be. This is not the case. But then again, this is just one book. Olive Paper is, I think, a great character because there is this balance of being pampered and being sheltered, but not being snobbish about her upbringing because she has to hide who she is or who he is, who they are, and the internal conflict of not being able to tell your closest friends who you are, even though some of them know, most of them ended up knowing and not caring about it. It was great, and her genuine care for people and being able to sort of divide between her captors and the people who needed help. Because at some point in the book, she has an opportunity to escape, but she doesn't take it because she knows that her presence there is genuinely helping, even though she is there against her will at the start. And then we have Darlene Bales, which I think is a dark horse of the book, because Brett did something smart, which Olive is the brawler, and the character of Olive is someone who is proficient at battle even before she goes through this rigorous training with the other creations. Darlene Bales. Darlene Bales is a musician, and he is this laid-back character who, at the first glance, you would think that he's a coward. No, he's not. He is conflict averse, but he is not a coward, and he continually steps up, even though he knows that he is not on the level of many of his opponents. But he is inventive, he's insanely empathetic, and just a genuinely good dude. And the other characters are fine. Which leads us to, I think, the biggest problem of the book, which is plot. This is kind of a retread of book number 1 and 2 combined, because in the book 1 there is this part where Arlen Bales, after his studies in the big city, goes to Crasians and befriends them and goes through the maze and all that. And then in the second book, it's through POV of the leader of the Crasians and his childhood, Jardir, and the path he goes through there, and the prophecies, and the bonds he makes with his fellow fighters, and all that, the brotherhood of it all. And so it's kind of a mirror of book 1 and 2. The plot, I mean. Plot is quite similar in its structure. And it's in execution, even. So I'm curious as to see on the larger scale how it goes, how it furthers. Because this is a good foundation for a new series. I hope you don't have to wait for a long time in between. And I actually enjoyed this. It was a page turner, and this is a genuine recommend. If you liked the series and you were equally frustrated as I was with it because you want to like it, because there is a lot to like, but I can tell you this. Somewhere along the line, he either got a better editor or a advisor or whatever, and his female characters are much better written. And also somewhere along the lines, his dialogue got cleaned up. And the world building is still as fascinating as it was. And that's about it. Thank you everyone for watching for this rambly, unstructured review. Thank you everyone for supporting me on Patreon. Please subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. And see you next time. For a retro review, I will be reviewing a book from the early 60s with a certain type of mammal and a full planet of them. So, see you next time. Bye-bye.